My name is Almeda, 32 years old, and I was standing outside my parents' house, looking at the cars lining the driveway and the elegant decorations adorning the entrance. My heart swelled with anticipation. After all, I had paid $25,000 for this anniversary party, wanting to finally bridge the gap between us. When my mother opened the door, her eyes turned cold. "What are you doing here? You weren't invited." Those words pierced through me like ice. If you are watching this right now, let me know where you are viewing from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of family betrayal and what I did next. I have always been the black sheep of my family. As a successful attorney in New York City, I have spent my entire adult life chasing one thing that always seemed just beyond my reach: my parents' approval. Despite my achievements in law school, making partner at a prestigious firm, and building a life that many would envy, the validation from Richard and Diane Walker never came. My relationship with my parents has been strained for as long as I can remember. The tension is especially palpable between my mother and me. She has always been critical of my choices, from my career path to my personal life. Nothing I do ever seems good enough for her. Then there is my older sister, Hazel. If I was the black sheep, Hazel was the golden child. She stayed in our small town of Cedar Grove, married her high school sweetheart Paul, and gave my parents 3 grandchildren. She followed the life script they had written for both of us, while I deviated completely. Growing up, the contrast in how we were treated was obvious to everyone except my parents. When I was 10, I won a regional piano competition, but my parents missed it because Hazel had a minor cold. When I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class, my mother spent most of the ceremony talking about how Hazel had achieved the same honor 4 years earlier, despite the fact that she had actually been salutatorian. The comparisons were relentless. "Why can you not be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence. My achievements were minimized, my failures magnified. It was as if my parents had decided from the beginning that Hazel would be the favorite, and nothing I could do would change that dynamic. The final straw came when I announced my decision to leave Cedar Grove for law school in New York. My father called it a betrayal. "We raised you to be part of this community," he said, as if my ambitions were a personal attack on him. My mother was even more direct. "You are choosing to abandon your family." But I went anyway. I had to. Cedar Grove was suffocating me, with its small-town politics and even smaller expectations. I knew there was a bigger world out there, and I wanted to be part of it. For the first few years after I left, I tried to maintain a connection. Weekly phone calls that became monthly, on holiday visits that grew increasingly uncomfortable, birthday cards and expensive gifts that never seemed to hit the mark. I even helped them financially when my father's hardware store went through a rough patch during the recession. $20,000 from my savings account, given freely and never fully acknowledged. Despite the distance, both physical and emotional, I never stopped trying to build a bridge. Surely there must be some way to make them see me, to make them proud. That desperate hope never quite died, though it probably should have. Last month, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a post from Hazel mentioning our parents' upcoming 35th wedding anniversary. I was stunned. No one had mentioned this milestone to me. Not my parents, not Hazel, not anyone from Cedar Grove who still occasionally reached out. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way you might expect. Instead of anger, I felt a renewed determination. This would be my grand gesture, the thing that would finally break through the walls between us. I would throw them the anniversary party of their dreams. I called Hazel immediately, excited to share my idea. To my surprise, she seemed enthusiastic. "That would be amazing, Almeda," she said. "They would never expect something like this." We spent hours on the phone discussing venues, food, and decorations. I wanted everything to be perfect. Hazel offered to help with the planning, but insisted that I should be the one to pay for everything. "You can afford it," she said, "and it would mean so much to them coming from you." Looking back, I should have noticed how she emphasized the word "from," but, at the time, I was too caught up in the fantasy of reconciliation to hear the warning bells. Hazel promised to keep the party a secret from our parents. "We will surprise them," she said. "It will be the perfect gift." I hung up the phone, feeling more hopeful than I had in years. Finally, I had found a way to show them how much they meant to me. Finally, I would be the daughter they wanted. If only I had known what was really happening behind the scenes. If only I had recognized the familiar pattern playing out once again. But hope is a powerful drug, and I was high on the possibility of healing my family. I could not have imagined how completely that hope would be shattered, or how public the humiliation would be when I stood on their doorstep, uninvited to the very party I had paid for. Planning the perfect anniversary party became my obsession over the next several weeks. I was determined to create an event that would make my parents not just happy, but also proud to call me their daughter. I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. After several lengthy discussions with Hazel, we decided on the ideal venue, the Lakeside Manor, a stunning Victorian-style villa overlooking Cedar Lake. My mother had once mentioned, during one of our rare civil conversations, that she had always dreamed of having an event there. "It is like something out of a romance novel," she had said with uncharacteristic wistfulness. "Your father proposed to me on that lakeshore, you know." I immediately contacted the venue and was thrilled to discover they had an opening on the exact date of my parents' anniversary. The rental fee was steep at $8,000 for the evening, but I did not hesitate. This was my chance to finally do something right in their eyes. Next came the catering. Hazel suggested Giovanni's, my parents' favorite Italian restaurant in Cedar Grove. They had celebrated every major family event there since before I was born. I arranged for a custom menu featuring all their favorites: stuffed mushrooms, chicken parmesan, and tiramisu for dessert. The catering bill alone came to $6,000, but I reasoned that authentic Italian cuisine made with premium ingredients was worth every penny. I hired a professional photographer, a string quartet for background music, and a local florist who created stunning arrangements of white roses and lilies, my mother's favorites. I even arranged for a custom cake, a 3-tiered masterpiece decorated with edible pearls and topped with a replica of my parents' wedding topper. The total cost quickly mounted to $25,000, practically emptying my savings account. But I convinced myself it was worth it. How could they not see my love and dedication after such a grand gesture? Throughout the planning process, I had regular calls with Hazel to coordinate details. She would be my eyes and ears on the ground in Cedar Grove, ensuring everything went smoothly while keeping the party a surprise from our parents. But as the weeks progressed, I began noticing troubling signs. Hazel became increasingly difficult to reach. She would take days to respond to my texts, and often missed our scheduled calls, citing vague excuses about being busy with the kids or having poor reception at her house. When I asked to see the guest list, wanting to make sure all the important people from my parents' lives were included, Hazel became oddly defensive. "I have it under control," she insisted. "You do not need to micromanage everything from New York." Her tone hurt me, but I backed off. I did not want to create tension when we were finally working together on something meaningful. Besides, she was right that she knew better who should be invited. I had been gone from Cedar Grove for over a decade. As the date approached, I sent the first payment to the event planner, a woman named Bethany, whom Hazel had recommended. $10,000 as a deposit, with the remainder to be paid on the day of the event. I received a polite thank you email from Bethany, confirming receipt and assuring me everything was on track. But something felt off. Whenever I asked for specific details about the preparations, Hazel would provide only vague assurances. "Everything is taken care of," she would say, quickly changing the subject. My uneasiness grew when I noticed Hazel had created a Facebook event for the party, but had not added me to it. When I mentioned this, she claimed it was an oversight and promptly added me, but I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. 2 weeks before the party, I still had not received a detailed schedule or confirmation of all the arrangements. My calls to Bethany went straight to voicemail, and her emails became increasingly brief and non-specific. All proceeding as planned, she wrote in response to my list of questions. Hazel has provided all necessary instructions. That was when the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened. Why was Bethany taking instructions from Hazel when I was the one paying for everything? I tried calling Hazel again, but she did not pick up. Instead, she texted me, "Super busy with party prep. We'll call tomorrow." But tomorrow came and went without a call. My instincts were screaming that something was very wrong, but I kept pushing those thoughts away. This was my sister, after all. We might have our differences, but surely she would not sabotage something this important. Still, I could not ignore my growing sense of dread. I decided to fly to Cedar Grove a day earlier than planned, ostensibly to help with last-minute preparations, but really to see for myself what was happening. As my plane landed in the small regional airport near Cedar Grove, I tried to silence the voice of doubt in my head. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Hazel was just overwhelmed with the responsibilities of planning such an important event while taking care of her family. But deep down, I knew. This was the same pattern that had defined our family dynamics for decades. I just never expected it to play out in such a calculated, expensive way. I checked into a small hotel near my parents' home, unpacked my bags, and prepared myself for whatever would come next. Little did I know, the truth would be far more painful than even my worst suspicions. The morning after I arrived in Cedar Grove, I tried calling Hazel again. Just as I expected, she did not answer. I left a message saying I was in town and wanted to meet to go over final details for the party. Then I decided to head to Maple Street Cafe, a local coffee shop where I used to study during high school, to gather my thoughts. Cedar Grove had not changed much in the decade I had been gone. The same brick buildings lined Main Street, the same town square with its aging gazebo where summer concerts were held. It was both comforting and suffocating, a physical reminder of why I had left and why part of me had always longed to come back. I had just ordered my latte when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Mildred Peterson, my former English teacher, approaching with a wide smile. "Almeda Walker, what a surprise to see you back in town," she exclaimed, giving me a warm hug. "Are you here for your parents' anniversary party tomorrow night?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, I am very excited about it." She looked at me curiously. "I was surprised not to see your name on the invitation. I assumed you were too busy with your big city law career to attend." My heart sank. "What do you mean my name was not on the invitation?" Mrs. Peterson frowned slightly. "The invitation said the party was being hosted by Hazel and your parents. I just assumed." I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. "Can I see the invitation?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She pulled out her phone and showed me the electronic invitation. Sure enough, there was an elegant graphic announcing the 35th wedding anniversary celebration of Richard and Diane Walker, hosted by their daughter Hazel Miller and family. There was no mention of me anywhere, not even in the list of family members who would be attending. "I am sure it was just an oversight," Mrs. Peterson said, noticing my expression. "You know how hectic party planning can be." I mumbled some excuse and hurried out of the cafe, my coffee forgotten on the table. Once outside, I leaned against the brick wall, trying to catch my breath. This could not be happening. There had to be some explanation. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and searched for the party on Facebook. I found it easily enough the event Hazel had reluctantly added me to a few weeks earlier. But now, looking more carefully at the details, I saw that it was described as a surprise anniversary celebration for Richard and Diane Walker, lovingly organized by their daughter Hazel. The comment section was filled with praise for Hazel's generosity and thoughtfulness. "Such a wonderful daughter," one person wrote. "Your parents are so lucky to have you," wrote another. I felt physically ill. Scrolling through the guest list, I saw dozens of familiar names: family friends, relatives, my parents, church friends, but mine was conspicuously absent. I had been removed from the guest list of the very party I was paying for. In a daze, I walked back to my hotel room and opened my laptop. I pulled up my email correspondence with Bethany, the event planner, and reviewed the contracts I had signed. Everything was in my name. All the payments had come from my account. There was no mention of Hazel anywhere in the official documentation. I called Bethany again, and this time she answered, sounding surprised to hear from me. Almeda? I did not expect to hear from you directly. Hazel handles all the communication. Bethany, I said, struggling to keep my voice level, I need you to clarify something for me. Who is officially hosting this party? There was an uncomfortable pause. Well, the contract is in your name, and you are the one paying for everything. But Hazel told me you wanted her to be the official host, since you could not be here to plan things in person. And did Hazel tell you I would not be attending? Another pause, longer this time. She said you had an important case that would prevent you from coming. She said you were disappointed, but that you had arranged this party as your gift since you could not be here in person. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that for a moment I could not speak. My own sister had systematically erased me from an event I had conceived and paid for, positioning herself as the generous, devoted daughter, while painting me as the absent, career-obsessed one who could not be bothered to attend. I thanked Bethany for her honesty and ended the call. Then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I called my sister and demanded answers. This time, Hazel picked up immediately. Almeda? Why are you calling again? I told you I am busy with preparations. Preparations for the party I am paying for but am not invited to? I asked, my voice cold. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. What are you talking about? Do not play dumb, Hazel. I am in Cedar Grove. I have seen the invitation. I have talked to Bethany. I know what you did. The facade crumbled instantly. You do not understand, she said, her voice taking on the whiny quality it always did when she was caught doing something wrong. Mom and Dad would appreciate this more coming from me. You know how they are. So you just decided to steal my idea and my money? To pretend this was all you're doing? To explicitly uninvite me from the party I am funding? I did not uninvite you, she protested weakly. I just did not include you in the guest list. There is a difference. A difference that means I would not be there to contradict your story of being the perfect, generous daughter, I replied, the pieces falling into place. This was never about giving our parents a wonderful anniversary. This was about you getting the credit, the praise, the gratitude. As always. That is not fair, Hazel said. I did most of the actual work. All you did was write a check. Anyone can do that. Her words hit me like a physical blow. A $25,000 check, Hazel. Money I saved for years. Money I earned working 80-hour weeks while you were posting pictures of your perfect family life on Facebook. You always have to bring money into it, she snapped. Just because you chose a soulless career that pays well does not make you better than me. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. Better than you? My entire life has been spent being told I am not as good as you, and now you have stolen the one thing I tried to do to finally earn their approval. They are my parents too, she said petulantly, and I am the one who stayed. I am the one who gives them grandchildren. I am the one who takes care of them when they need something. And I am the one who pays for it all, I replied quietly. The emergency roof repair last year. Dad's medical bills when his insurance would not cover that specialist. The down payment on their new car. Who do you think funded all of that, Hazel? There was silence on the other end of the line. You know what the saddest part is? I continued. I genuinely thought this time would be different. I thought we were finally working together as sisters. I thought this party would heal our family. It will, Hazel insisted. Just not the way you planned it. I ended the call without another word, my mind reeling from the magnitude of the betrayal. Not just from Hazel, who had always been self-centered and competitive, but from my parents, who had apparently been complicit in this deception. They must have known where the money for such an elaborate party was coming from. They must have questioned why their supposedly estranged daughter was funding their celebration. But they had chosen, as they always did, to believe the narrative that cast Hazel as the hero and me as the villain, or in this case, the absent failure, who could not even be bothered to attend her own parents' anniversary. As I sat in my hotel room, surrounded by the emotional ghosts of my childhood, I made a decision. I would not slink away in defeat this time. I would not accept being erased and replaced yet again. No, this time I would show up, uninvited, unwanted, but unmistakably present. It was time to force my family to face the truth they had been denying for decades. Tomorrow night, I would crash my own party. The day of the anniversary party arrived with frustrating slowness. I spent the morning and afternoon in a state of anxious anticipation, alternating between certainty about my decision to attend and crushing doubt. Was I making a mistake? Would confronting my family so publicly only deepen the rift between us? But then I would remember the invitation that deliberately excluded me, the Facebook event listing my sister as the generous host, and the $25,000 of my money being used to fund a celebration. I was not welcome to attend, and my resolve would harden once again. I spent extra time getting ready, determined to look my absolute best. I had brought my favorite dress for the occasion, a deep emerald green silk that complemented my complexion and made me feel confident. I styled my hair in loose waves, applied my makeup with care, and put on the pearl earrings that had been a gift from my grandmother, the only family member who had ever seemed to truly see and accept me. As I stood in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the poised, elegant woman looking back at me. Gone was the eager-to-please daughter, desperately seeking approval. In her place was a successful attorney who knew her worth and was not afraid to stand up for herself. I only hoped that confidence would not desert me when I needed it most. The party was scheduled to begin at 7 in the evening. I decided to arrive at 8, when things would be in full swing. The drive to the lakeside manor felt surreal, like I was floating above myself, watching this drama unfold from a distance. I parked my rental car at the far end of the lot, giving myself a moment to gather my courage before approaching the venue. Through the large windows, I could see the party in progress. Twinkling lights hung from the ceiling, creating a magical atmosphere. Flowers adorned every table, exactly as I had specified in my conversations with the florist. The string quartet played in the corner, the music just barely audible from where I stood. And there, in the center of it all, were my parents, my father, Richard, looking distinguished in a dark suit. My mother, Diane, resplendent in a blue dress that brought out her eyes. They were smiling, accepting congratulations from a circle of friends, looking happier than I had seen them in years. Next to them stood Hazel, playing her role perfectly. The devoted daughter who had arranged this beautiful celebration, graciously accepting compliments on her generosity and thoughtfulness. For a moment, watching them through the window, I almost turned back. They looked so happy, so perfect together. The three of them, the real family unit. Maybe Hazel was right. Maybe this was how it should be. But then I remembered all the years of emotional neglect, the constant comparisons, the dismissal of my achievements. I remembered how it felt to be told I was not welcome at an event I had paid for. And I knew I could not walk away. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked through the doors of the Lakeside Manor. The reaction was immediate. Conversations faltered as people recognized me. Mrs. Wilson, my mother's oldest friend, stopped mid-sentence, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Mr. Thompson, my father's fishing buddy, quickly looked away, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on the tablecloth. I moved through the crowd with deliberate steps, feeling the weight of every stare. Some guests looked confused, others uncomfortable, a few openly hostile. I heard whispers. "What is she doing here?" I thought she could not make it. Did Hazel know she was coming? And then I was standing in front of them, my parents and Hazel. The expression on my mother's face shifted from confusion to displeasure in the span of a heartbeat. My father looked away, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. Only Hazel seemed unsurprised, though her face had paled considerably. "Almeida," my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval. "What are you doing here? You were not invited." The words hung in the air between us, a public rejection that silenced the nearby conversations. Everyone was watching now, witness to this family drama playing out in real time. "I know," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the pain lancing through me. "I found that odd, considering I paid for all of this." My mother blinked, confusion momentarily replacing her coldness. "What are you talking about?" "The venue, the food, the music, the flowers, all of it. $25,000 from my account." Did Hazel not mention that detail when she was taking credit for arranging this celebration? My father finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Is this true, Hazel?" he asked, turning to my sister. Hazel's face flushed red. "It is not like that," she stammered. "Almeida offered to help with the costs, but the whole thing was my idea. I did all the work, made all the arrangements." "That is a lie," I said quietly, but firmly. "I conceived of this party, contacted the venue, hired the caterer, and paid for everything. Hazel was supposed to be helping me surprise you, not stealing the credit and excluding me from the guest list." "You are just jealous," Hazel snapped, abandoning any pretense of civility. "You always have been. You could not stand the thought of me doing something nice for Mom and Dad, so now you are trying to ruin it." "If that were true," I replied evenly, "why is my name on every contract? Why did all the payments come from my account? Why did the event planner think I could not attend because I was too busy with work, not because I was deliberately uninvited by my own sister?" A murmur ran through the watching crowd. This was turning into exactly the kind of public confrontation I had both feared and, on some level, wanted. The truth was finally coming out, exposed for everyone to see. My mother, ever concerned with appearances, tried to regain control of the situation. "This is not the time or place for this discussion, Almeida. You are causing a scene at our anniversary celebration." "The celebration I paid for," I reminded her. "The one you apparently knew I was funding but still chose to exclude me from." "We did not know," my father interjected, looking genuinely confused. "Hazel told us she had been saving for months to give us this party." I looked at my sister, seeing the panic in her eyes as her deception unraveled. "Is that what you told them, Hazel? That you somehow managed to save $25,000 on a teacher's salary while raising 3 kids? Did they actually believe that?" "You are not welcome here," my mother interrupted, her voice cold and final. "You are not going to ruin our special day with your accusations and your drama. Please leave, Almeida." I stood there, surrounded by people who had known me my entire life, being publicly rejected by my own mother at an event I had poured my heart and finances into. The humiliation was complete, the pain almost unbearable. But I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, met my mother's cold gaze, and said simply, "Understood." Then I turned and walked out of the lakeside manor, head held high despite the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. I had wanted so desperately for this night to bring healing and reconciliation. Instead, it had only confirmed what I had always known, but tried to deny. In my family's eyes, I would never be enough, never be worthy, never truly be one of them. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of seeking approval and acceptance from people who were incapable of giving it suddenly seemed like a fool's errand. I had built my entire identity around being the rejected daughter, the one who needed to prove herself worthy of love. But standing there, with the sound of the party continuing without me, I realized I was done proving myself, done seeking validation from people who had shown, time and again, that they were not capable of seeing my worth. It was time to stop being a victim of my family's narrative, time to take control of my own story. And as I walked to my car, a plan began to form in my mind. I sat in my rental car, hands gripping the steering wheel, though I had not started the engine. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I had spent a lifetime crying over my family's rejection. I would not waste another tear on them tonight. The humiliation of being thrown out of the party I had paid for burned through me, a white-hot flame of indignation that slowly crystallized into resolve. For 32 years, I had been the victim in my family's story, the one who was never good enough, never worthy enough, never lovable enough. But I was not that scared little girl anymore. I was Almeda Walker, attorney at law, a woman who had built a successful life on her own terms. I did not need their approval to validate my existence. With sudden clarity, I realized I had one power they could not take away from me: the power of my own money. The very thing Hazel and my parents had been happy to take advantage of while continuing to reject me. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The final payment of $15,000 to the Lakeside Manor was scheduled to process tomorrow, completing the $25,000 total for the event. With a few taps, I marked the transaction as disputed and blocked any further withdrawals to the venue or the caterer. Then I called Bethany, the event planner. To her credit, she answered immediately, despite being in the middle of managing the party. "Almeda, is everything okay?" "Not exactly, Bethany. I have just been thrown out of my parents' anniversary party by my mother and sister." "Oh my God," she gasped. "I am so sorry. I had no idea this would happen." "Neither did I replied. "But I want to be clear about something. I am disputing the final payment for tonight's event. The initial deposit of $10,000 is all you will be receiving." There was a pause. "I understand you are upset, Almeda, but we have a contract. All the vendors need to be paid. The food has been prepared, the musicians hired." "I know," I interrupted, "and I am truly sorry to put you in this position. You have done a wonderful job with the event. But I cannot in good conscience pay for a celebration I have been explicitly told I am not welcome to attend." Another pause, longer this time. "What would you like me to do?" she finally asked. "Nothing dramatic," I assured her. "I am not asking you to shut down the party immediately. But if my parents or sister do not arrange alternative payment within the next 30 minutes, I would appreciate it if you would inform them that the services will need to conclude early." "I see," Bethany said slowly. "That seems, reasonable under the circumstances." We discussed a few more details before ending the call. I felt no joy in what I had done, only a grim satisfaction at finally standing up for myself. This was not about revenge. It was about refusing to be a doormat any longer. I started the car and drove to the Lake House, a small bar about a mile from the venue. It was quiet inside, just a few locals watching a baseball game on the television above the bar. I ordered a martini and sat at the bar, trying to process the events of the evening. I had just taken my first sip when my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. I contemplated not answering, but decided I owed it to myself to see this through to the end. I accepted the call. "Almeda." My father's voice was tight with anger. "What have you done?" "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I assume Bethany has spoken to you." "This is unacceptable," he snapped. "The caterers are threatening to pack up the food. The bar has stopped serving drinks. The musicians are asking when they will be paid." "That sounds stressful," I acknowledged. "Perhaps Hazel can cover the costs, since she was so eager to take credit for the party." "Do not be ridiculous," he said. "You know she cannot afford this. How could you do this to us? To our guests? Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I took another sip of my martini. Actually, I do know exactly how embarrassing this island I experienced it firsthand, when my own mother told me I was not welcome at an event I conceived and paid for. When my sister lied to everyone about her role in planning this celebration. When my family, once again, showed me exactly where I stand in their priorities. "That is not fair," my father protested, but with less conviction. "No, it is not," I agreed. "None of this is fair. It has not been fair for 32 years. I heard my mother's voice in the background, demanding that my father give her the phone. There was a rustling sound, and then her sharp tone cut through the line. "Do not tell me this is true. Are you actually sabotaging our anniversary party because your feelings were hurt? How dare you? How dare I?" I repeated, A lifetime of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. How dare I expect to be treated with basic respect by my own family? How dare I object to being publicly humiliated and thrown out of an event I paid $25,000 for? How dare I finally stand up for myself after decades of being treated like I am worth less than Hazel? You have always been so dramatic, my mother dismissed, always making everything about you. This party was supposed to be my gift to you, I replied, a gesture of love and reconciliation, and you and Hazel turned it into yet another opportunity to reject and humiliate me. So yes, I am withdrawing my financial support. If that makes me dramatic, so be it. You will transfer that money right now, my mother demanded. Our guests are waiting. This is completely unacceptable behavior. No, I said simply. I will not. What do you want, Almeda? My father's voice returned, sounding tired. An apology? Fine. We are sorry you felt excluded. Is that enough? What I want, I said slowly, is for you both to acknowledge what has happened here. I want Hazel to admit to everyone that this party was my idea and my money, not hers. I want you to recognize that I have been trying to win your approval my entire life, while you have consistently favored my sister regardless of what either of us did. And I want a genuine apology not for how I felt, but for how I was treated. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice cold and final. That is not going to happen. You can either release the funds or be responsible for ruining this evening for everyone. I closed my eyes, absorbing the reality that even now, faced with the consequences of their actions, my parents were incapable of seeing their part in this dysfunctional dynamic. I see, I said quietly. Then I guess we all have to live with our choices. I hope the remainder of your evening is pleasant, despite the abbreviated festivities. I ended the call before they could respond, turned off my phone, and ordered another martini. The bartender, sensing my mood, served it without comment, leaving me alone with my thoughts. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up to my family. I had refused to play the role they had assigned me, the perpetually seeking, perpetually rejected daughter. It did not feel like a victory. There was too much sadness for that, but it did feel like the first step towards something new. As I sat in that quiet bar, miles away from the chaos I had created at the Lakeside Manor, I realized I had finally done what I should have done years ago. I had stopped giving my power away to people who did not value it, or me. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: I would never again allow my family to define my worth or dictate my place in the world. That chapter of my life was finally, irrevocably closed. In a small town like Cedar Grove, news travels fast. By the next morning, everyone knew what had happened at the Walker anniversary party. The abrupt end to the festivities when the catering staff began packing up, the hurried explanations, the whispers and speculations, and, most dramatically, the revelation that the party had actually been funded by the estranged daughter who had been publicly turned away at the door. I woke up in my hotel room to find my phone flooded with messages and missed calls. Most were from my parents and Hazel, ranging from angry demands to tearful pleas. I deleted those without reading them. But there were others: family friends, distant relatives, even old high school classmates, expressing various degrees of shock, support, and curiosity. Cousin Belinda, just heard what happened. That was savage, but honestly, they had it coming. My Aunt Judith, call me when you can. There are things about your mother you should understand. Megan from high school, the whole town is talking about last night. Team Almeda all the way. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the messages with a strange sense of detachment. For so long, I had worried about what these people thought of me. Now, I found I did not particularly care. Their opinions, positive or negative, no longer defined me. I ordered room service breakfast and contemplated my next steps. My original plan had been to stay in Cedar Grove for 3 days, the day before the party, the day of, and the day after. Now, I considered changing my flight and returning to New York immediately. What was the point of staying? But something held me back. Running away now would feel too much like conceding defeat, like giving my family the last word yet again. Besides, there was a part of me, a small but persistent voice, that wondered if this dramatic confrontation might actually lead to some kind of resolution. I was finishing my coffee when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Evelyn, my mother's younger sister, standing in the hallway. "Aunt Evelyn," I said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Can I come in?" she asked, her expression serious. "We need to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her enter. Aunt Evelyn had always been kind to me, but she had never intervened in the family dynamics or openly taken my side against my mother. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked, as she settled into the armchair by the window. "Cedar Grove has exactly 2 hotels, Almeida," she said with a small smile. "It was not exactly detective work. Besides, everyone is looking for you this morning." I sat on the edge of the bed, facing her. "I assume you have heard what happened." "The whole town has," she confirmed, though I suspect the versions circulating vary significantly depending on who is telling the story. "And what version are you here to tell me?" I asked, unable to keep the wariness from my voice. Aunt Evelyn sighed deeply. "None of them. I am here to tell you something that should have been shared with you years ago. Something that might help you understand, though not excuse why your relationship with your parents, especially your mother, has been so strained." I felt a flicker of both curiosity and apprehension. "What are you talking about?" "Your mother and your father," she began, then paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Their marriage was arranged, in a manner of speaking. Your grandparents strongly encouraged the match, because the Walkers had status in the community, and your mother's family needed that connection. She had other dreams. She wanted to be a teacher, to travel, but that was not the path laid out for her." I frowned, trying to see the relevance. "What does this have to do with how they treated me?" "When your mother became pregnant with Hazel, it solidified her commitment to a life she had not fully chosen. But by the time you came along, 4 years later, the resentment had already taken root. Your father was often absent, building his business, leaving your mother alone with a young child and then a newborn. So I was a burden," I said flatly. "No," Aunt Evelyn corrected. "You were a reminder, a bright, independent, spirited reminder of everything she had given up. As you grew, your determination to forge your own path, to leave Cedar Grove, to build a career on your terms, it was like watching a version of herself that she had suppressed, and that was painful for her." I sat with this information, turning it over in my mind. So she resented me for having the courage to do what she could not. Aunt Evelyn nodded slowly. "I believe so, yes. Though I do not think she has ever admitted this to herself. It was easier to favor Hazel, who followed the traditional path, who validated your mother's choices by making the same ones." "That explains some things," I acknowledged, "but it does not excuse decades of emotional neglect, or what they did last night." "No, it does not," Aunt Evelyn agreed. "Nothing excuses that. I am not asking you to forgive them, Almeida. I just thought you deserved to know that the problem was never really about you. It was always about them, about your mother's regrets, and your father's complicity in maintaining the family dynamic that kept her trapped." We talked for another hour, Aunt Evelyn filling in gaps in my understanding of my family history, offering a perspective I had never considered. It did not heal the wound of last night's humiliation, but it did provide a context that made it slightly less personal, slightly more comprehensible. After Aunt Evelyn left, I decided to extend my stay in Cedar Grove for one more day. There were still conversations to be had, even if they were difficult ones. That afternoon, as I was returning from a walk around the town, my phone rang. It was Hazel. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "What do you want, Hazel?" "We need to talk," she said, her voice lacking its usual confident edge. "In person. Please." I agreed to meet her at a small park near the hotel, a neutral territory away from prying eyes. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I could remember seeing her in years. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat beside her, leaving a deliberate space between us. "Say what you need to say," I replied, not unkindly but not offering any easy forgiveness either. "I am sorry," she began, the words coming out in a rush. "What I did was wrong. Taking credit for your party, excluding you from the guest list, lying to Mom and Dad, it was all wrong." "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question that had been burning in me since I discovered her deception. Hazel looked down at her hands. "Because I was jealous," she admitted. "You have this amazing career, this glamorous life in New York. You make more money in a month than I do in a year. Meanwhile, I am stuck in Cedar Grove, teaching 3rd grade and raising 3 kids on a tight budget. When you suggested this lavish party, something I could never afford to give them, I just snapped. So you stole it," I said bluntly. "You took my gesture and made it yours." "Yes," she whispered. And then it spiraled out of control. Once I started the lie, I could not figure out how to end it without everyone discovering what I had done. So I just kept going, hoping somehow it would work out. I shook my head, still struggling to understand the depth of her betrayal. And Mom and Dad? Did they really not know where the money was coming from? Hazel hesitated. "They suspected," she finally admitted. "They questioned how I could afford it on my salary. I told them I had been saving for years, and that some of the vendors were giving me special rates because of connections through the school. I do not think they fully believed me, but they wanted to. Because it was easier to accept your lie than to acknowledge my generosity," I concluded. "Probably," Hazel agreed, a flash of her old honesty breaking through. "You know how they are, especially Mom. She has spent so many years casting you as the villain in her story. She cannot see you any other way." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of decades of family dysfunction hanging between us. "What happens now?" Hazel finally asked. "I do not know," I answered truthfully. "I am not sure there is a way forward from this." "There has to be," Hazel insisted. "You are my sister. Despite everything, I do love you, Almeda." I looked at her, this woman who had been both my closest ally and my fiercest competitor throughout childhood. "Love should not look like what happened last night," I said quietly. "I know," she whispered, "but maybe it can look different going forward, if you are willing to try." I did not commit to anything that day, but I did agree to one more conversation before leaving town. A conversation with all of them, my parents and Hazel, together. We met the next morning at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from the gossip and stares of Cedar Grove proper. My mother looked like she had not slept. My father appeared aged by 10 years overnight, and Hazel was uncharacteristically subdued. The conversation was difficult, painful, with moments of defensive anger from my mother and attempts at peacemaking from my father. But beneath it all, there was something new, an acknowledgement, however reluctant, that they had treated me unfairly not just at the party, but throughout my life. "I do not understand why you could not just be happy with the life we wanted for you," my mother said at one point, unwittingly revealing the heart of the issue. "Because it was not the life I wanted for myself," I replied. "And parents are supposed to love their children for who they are, not who they wish them to be." My father, in a rare moment of insight, added, "We failed at that, with both of you, in different ways. It was not a perfect reconciliation. There were no tearful embraces or promises that everything would be different now. But it was a beginning, a crack in the facade of denial that had defined our family for as long as I could remember." As I prepared to return to New York the next day, I carried with me not the healing I had hoped for when planning the anniversary party, but something perhaps more valuable, a clear-eyed understanding of my family, of myself, and of the boundaries I would need to maintain going forward. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. Whether it would lead to genuine change remained to be seen, but at least now, we were all starting from a place of honesty rather than illusion. And for the first time in my life, I was no longer seeking their approval or validation. I was simply Almeda Walker, complete in myself, regardless of how they chose to see me. The journey back to reconciliation with my family did not happen overnight. In fact, the first few weeks after I returned to New York, there was very little communication between us at all. I threw myself into my work at the law firm, taking on extra cases and staying late at the office rather than facing the empty silence of my apartment and the thoughts that would inevitably turn to Cedar Grove. But slowly, tentatively, connections began to rebuild. First came an email from my father, a brief, awkwardly worded note asking how I was doing. I responded with equal brevity, civil, but not effusive. A week later, Hazel called. The conversation stiff at first, but gradually easing into something resembling normal sibling interaction. My mother took the longest. A full month passed before she sent a card in the mail, her elegant handwriting conveying formal regards but little emotion. It was clear that if healing was to happen, I would need to establish new boundaries and expectations. During a video call with Hazel, I outlined what I needed from our relationship moving forward: honesty, respect for my choices, and an end to the competitive dynamic that had dominated our interactions since childhood. I cannot keep trying to win a game where the rules are designed for me to lose, I told her. Either we relate to each other as equals, or we do not relate at all. To her credit, Hazel seemed to understand. I have been thinking a lot about why I did what I did, she admitted. It was not just about the party. It was about a lifetime of feeling like I had to protect my position as the favorite, even when that position made me miserable in its own way. That conversation marked a turning point. For perhaps the first time, Hazel and I were seeing each other clearly not as rivals for our parents' attention, but as sisters who had both been damaged by the toxic family dynamic we grew up in. The process was slower with my parents. During a tense phone call, I made it clear that I would no longer accept being treated as less than Hazel, or having my achievements diminished, or my choices criticized. I love you both, I told them, but I do not need your approval to validate my existence. I will not keep trying to earn something that should have been given freely. My father, in his typically practical way, accepted these terms relatively easily. My mother struggled more. During one particularly difficult conversation, she finally admitted something I had long suspected, but never heard acknowledged. I do not understand you, Almeda, she said. I never have. You were always so determined, so sure of what you wanted. I never had that luxury. It was as close as she would come to confirming what Aunt Evelyn had told me about her own thwarted dreams and the resentment she had projected onto me. It was not an apology, but it was a moment of honesty, and I chose to accept it as such. Meanwhile, back in New York, I began to focus on healing myself. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Maxwell, who specialized in family trauma. Our sessions helped me unpack the patterns that had shaped my sense of self-worth and my relationships with others. You have spent your entire life trying to earn love from people who were not equipped to give it unconditionally, Dr. Maxwell observed during one session. That is not your failure. It is theirs. Those words resonated deeply. For so long, I had internalized the message that I was somehow deficient, that if I could just be better, smarter, more successful, more accommodating, more like Hazel, then my parents would finally love me the way I craved. Recognizing the fundamental flaw in that thinking was both liberating and profoundly sad. I also began to invest more intentionally in my chosen family, the friends and colleagues who had supported me without conditions or competitions, Sunday brunches with Natalie and Sarah, my law school friends, weekly tennis matches with Derek, a fellow attorney at my firm, movie nights with the self-proclaimed Misfits Club, a group of transplants to New York who, like me, had complicated relationships with their families of origin. These connections, based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation, reminded me that I was worthy of love exactly as I was. They helped fill the void that my family's conditional acceptance had created. 4 months after the anniversary party debacle, I received an unexpected invitation. My parents wanted me to join them and Hazel for a weekend, at a lake house rental, a neutral location where we could spend time together without the weight of Cedar Grove memories and judgments. My initial reaction was reluctance. Was I ready to spend concentrated time with the people who had hurt me so deeply? Dr. Maxwell encouraged me to consider it, but with clear boundaries in place. You can test the waters without diving in completely, she advised. Set limits on the time you will spend there. Have your own transportation. Know that you can leave if it becomes too much. With those safeguards in mind, I agreed to the gathering. The weekend was not perfect by any means. There were moments of tension, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves. But there were also glimpses of something new. My father asking thoughtful questions about my work. My mother complimenting my handling of a difficult conversation without adding a comparison to Hazel. Hazel herself sharing her struggles with parenthood without framing it as a sacrifice I had selfishly avoided. Small steps, but significant ones. 6 months after the party, we gathered again, this time for Thanksgiving. I hosted in my New York apartment, the first time my parents had visited my home in nearly 5 years. Having them in my space, on my terms, shifted the dynamic in subtle but important ways. They could see the life I had built for myself, the beautiful apartment with views of Central Park, the wall of awards from my legal career, the photos of friends and travels that told the story of a rich, full existence beyond Cedar Grove. As we sat around my dining table, I realized something profound. I no longer needed their validation. I had stopped measuring my worth by their approval. The desperate longing that had driven me to spend $25,000 on an anniversary party had been replaced by a calm self-assurance. I knew who I was, and I was at peace with that knowledge. That revelation did not erase the past, or magically transform our family into the warm, supportive unit I had once yearned for. But it did allow me to relate to my parents and sister from a place of strength rather than need. I could love them without being diminished by their limitations. The healing continues, a day-by-day process of establishing new patterns and expectations. There are still moments when old hurts resurface, when a careless comment or thoughtless comparison threatens to reopen wounds that are still tender. But now, I have the tools and the perspective to address these moments directly rather than retreating into the familiar pain of rejection. The most valuable lesson from this journey has been understanding the true nature of love and worth. Real love does not require performance or perfection. It does not demand that you contort yourself to fit someone else's expectations. It accepts you as you are, celebrates your uniqueness, and supports your growth on your own terms. I did not find that kind of love in my family of origin, at least not initially, but I have found it in the family I have chosen, in the relationships I have cultivated with intention and care. And slowly, imperfectly, I am building a new kind of relationship with my parents and sister, one based on who we actually are, not who we wish each other to be. The anniversary party debacle, painful as it was, became the catalyst for this transformation. Sometimes it takes a dramatic rupture to break patterns that have calcified over decades. Sometimes you have to stop a party to start a healing. As I look to the future, I no longer fear rejection or crave approval the way I once did. I know my value does not depend on external validation, and that knowledge has set me free to love my imperfect family in a way that honors both their humanity and my own. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who could not see your true worth? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it meant causing temporary discomfort? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by family approval. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we are born into.